Good afternoon, everybody. I'm attorney Danyl Patterson, candidate for the 190th state rep seat. It's Thursday, and I am so West Philly. So I'm calling out all my friends in Haddington and Dunlap, moving over to Cedar Park, Mill Creek, Cathedral Park, Carroll Park, East Park Side, West Belmont. And moving on up the ladder there, don't forget about my friends in Winfield Heights and Allegheny West. Oh, and I always have to give a special shout out to 4 Points because it's its own distinct kind of flavor right over there off Conshohocken Avenue. We visit it all the time, but a lot of folks actually don't even know that's called 5 Points. I tell them all the time, it's where the point meets, but actually it's a whole neighborhood named after the bar. Right there on the corner, over there by the old Pathmark and now the new Fresh Grocer. I'm attorney Danyl Patterson, and I've got some updates for you. And that's a little bit interesting because, I came on, I was so excited to tell you last week on Feel Good Friday, hey, there is some aid coming to you. And you got to make sure that you've got your documents together so you can get in line so you won't get left out. And then the document requirements came and the new rules came and all the stuff that we didn't know about in advance came. And so there's a hurdle and it's been coming back to me. I actually had to go and read the law. I know, right? I read law in my spare time. And then I had to trace the funding source. So there's a little bit of unnecessary hurdles that's going on with the COVID-19 rental assistance program. So let me tell you what that is very, very specifically. Okay, so we have an assistance program that is supposed to be here so that during this pandemic, this emergency, we're going to make sure that folks aren't falling too far behind on their rent. Now, that's very important because we know that people don't have any money. They're not paying those bills. And, we don't really want folks to have to choose between feeding their family and where they're going to live. So what first happened was there was a moratorium on evictions. So that was very first. As a part of the pandemic relief from the governor, there were to be no evictions. So please understand that doesn't mean that no evictions will ever occur. That just means that the courts were not going to entertain them during the pandemic. The next thing that happens is the courts were closed down. So of course there were going to be no evictions during the pandemic. But I'm here to tell you that just because we are not getting evicted in the middle of the pandemic doesn't mean that the day that the courts open and that those evictions are not going to be filed. So what we know, according to Governor Wolf's stay home order, is that there are no evictions to be filed through June the 4th. Now, initially, courts were actually expected to open back up fully on June 1st. What you all need to know is that there's still court. And I've told you guys this over and over again, all court isn't open, but emergency hearings were still being held, which is why some things were still going through in family court, depending upon what your situation was, that there were, folks being moved out as a part of the COVID response into the prisons. Those were still court hearings, petitions that were being filed and hearings that were being held via Zoom, because, we're out here trying to get technologically astute. Now, we know that Philadelphia is a little bit more behind the times than some other places. And I'm sure you all know that it wasn't even 5 months ago that our entire court system was hacked and we couldn't dock it. So that was a whole problem that attorneys were having as far as being able to access things here in Philadelphia. So now what happened? We had this pandemic and we're trying to respond. We meaning everybody. Governor Wolf hands down and he immediately says he sees there's going to be a problem. That problem is going to be people are not going to be able to pay their rent. That's just a given. You don't have any money, you can't pay rent. Now, the other thing is, and I think you guys heard this, well, David Foster has spoken about it and it's, constantly discussed. Y'all know that we have a housing crisis for affordable housing units here in Philadelphia. As a matter of fact, they say that we're about more than 100,000 units shy of actually being able to house our population. We talk about gentrification all the time, and we talk about the growing cost of living in Philadelphia. So if you couple that with the fact that people have rent that is actually their housing is more than 30% of their income because of the rising cost of rents and just living in Philadelphia in general, what you see is that there's really going to be a crisis. So now, traditional unemployment, which we didn't even know was going to be applicable here, but traditional unemployment maxes out at about $600 a week. And that's if you're earning at the upper echelons. As I explained to you, unemployment is only supposed to max out as somebody making about $40,000. Meaning, so if you were making $80,000, all you were going to get is that same $2,400. If you were making $100,000, all you were going to get was that same $2,400. So that meant that if I had a $2,500 a month apartment on Rittenhouse, or an $1,800 a month apartment in the Graduate Hospital area, that meant that I was going to have a problem real quick, and we were going to be delving into those savings. Okay, so what they said is no evictions. Fine. That's great. That means that they were not going to consider evictions as a part of the emergency court hearings. And that's great. We're not going to force folks to, sit down and try to, figure out what's going to go on with this money. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever been through the eviction process, but in Philadelphia, it's definitely a process. It's not like the surrounding counties. So typically what happens is if your arrears in your rent, your landlord will send you a 10-day notice letter that they, want to proceed with eviction. And then in 30 days, they would move, so they give you a time to cure. And then in 30 days, they'll go ahead and they'll file for the eviction. Takes a little bit of time for the hearing to actually occur. Y'all know that it's not we file it today and you're going to go to court tomorrow like it is in Delaware County and Montgomery County. So there's some time on the lag in. Fine. But in the interim, you're still accruing late fees and you're still accruing back rent. And so you're kind of digging yourself a hole and digging yourself a hole and digging yourself a hole. And so we have a whole new problem. So Philadelphia, or we thought, Philadelphia said, hey, here's this rental assistance program. It's the COVID emergency rental assistance program. And it's going to be great. It's for Philadelphia residents. All you need to do is apply. Well, remember when I told you guys last Friday, have your documents ready? They were going to go live on Tuesday with the first acceptance of applications, and we wanted to make sure that you guys were in line. Yeah, so the documents that were required and you got together were not necessarily documents that you needed to get in line, and that's where the hurdle came from. Okay, so as a part of the assistance, you actually need the cooperation of your landlord. And you would think that would be really easy to get, right? Right. But it's not. So what the landlord had to agree to as a part of for you, the renter, to receive rental assistance is they had to forego any late fees. So that's number one. So if you had late fees that were $50 to $80 a month, and that they had to be forgiven. Also, the landlord had to agree not to move on past late, meaning, so let's say, I actually don't have it in front of me what the actual date the program dates back to, but let's say March 1st. If you were already late March 1st, then the landlord had to agree to waive late fees before the March 1st deadline. The other thing that the landlord had to agree to is they had to agree to give the city 6 to 8 months to actually pay them. So it's not like your rent and it's due on X day. Basically, there was lag time built in so the city could catch up. Well, that's great for the city. That's a bureaucracy. But if I'm a small landlord and I only have one property, then can I really survive waiting on the landlord to pay me? That's a question. Now, but then there was the same problem with everything else that's actually occurred that the city has controlled with getting money out in this epidemic. Well, sorry, and I have to be correct, in this pandemic. And that is this. The city added the extra obstacle that the landlord couldn't owe the city any money. I'm going to go back to that again. So you, the renter, would have to have a landlord who did not owe the city any money. So that means that the landlord can't owe back taxes, real estate taxes, property taxes, business taxes, anything, in order for you, the tenant, to be able to access this relief. And then the landlord only had 7 days from the date of your application to cure, meaning to fix it. So now here I have on this thread. So Peggy Armstead, I'm going to use you because you're first. So Miss Peggy is my renter, and she is having trouble, and she's eligible for the COVID assistance. Okay, so she applies, and we're going to talk about COVID assistance because we have Ernie on here, and she told us that there's another problem, is that it's only applying to those folks who specifically lost their jobs as a result of COVID. Now, maybe you had already lost your job before this and you were not able to become reemployed because of COVID. That didn't count. It only meant if you actually lost your job as a result of COVID. That's the only relief that you can get. And you have to certify that. Just like unemployment right now, if you go into the unemployment compensation website, there is now a specific line that says, did you lose your job as a result of COVID-19? It doesn't ask you how. It doesn't ask you, are you caring for a loved one? Were you yourself sick? Did your job shut down? It doesn't ask those questions. But you must certify for every week that you lost your job as a result of COVID, one, and two, that you remain unemployed as a result of COVID. So those are the two new, very specific criteria. So if you are applying for this rental assistance, you have to have lost income because of COVID-19. So that means that if you were already in arrears or already had problems, those monies were not applicable. So let's say, because we're using Miss Peggy, and I know she's hanging in there with me, and she doesn't mind that I'm using her just as an example. So Miss Peggy, so let's say you were 2 months in arrears already at the time that the pandemic started, and I was already on the verge of maybe evicting you because for non-payment of rent. So now I have to forego that eviction process as a part of agreeing to participate in the rental assistance program for you. So basically, what they did was they made the landlord's problem the renter's problem. So you may have everything else that you need to be able to apply for those monies here in the city of Philadelphia and find out that you still are not eligible for this rental assistance. One more time. You, as the tenant, may be doing everything that you need to do and find out that you are still not eligible for this rental assistance. So where else did this happen? In the SBA loans. What happened? The SBA program, they said that now there was an issue with your student loans, which was really crazy because what? We know that under CARES, the student loans were not able to be collected at all through to October of 2020. That's a part of the law. So why is it that they were now attaching it to small business owners who were applying for EIDL and the bridge loans? And I told y'all about the 5 different kinds of relief. Okay. But it wasn't just that. LISC had money available. Verizon had money available. The city of Philadelphia had small business money available. And if you were not current on your business taxes, you weren't able to participate in the program. This was not a part of the monies that were allocated for CARES. And therein lies the rub. The money for the rental assistance program is actually being distributed under the CARES Act. It is federal money through HUD. HUD is a federal program. Okay, so why is the city now adding additional city regulations that are not a part of the requirement that they have to receive the monies and passing them through to the renter? I don't know. Why are they? We're in the middle of a crisis, people. If you're supposed to be helping people and you're supposed to be helping them across the board, why would you put another level of protection on for yourself, City of Philadelphia, to get those monies? Well, I'm going to tell you why. Because we're in the middle of a pandemic, and we all know that the city is going to have serious financial issues as a result of COVID-19. So if I can make the landlords pay back taxes, business taxes, real property taxes, whatever taxes I can come up with them pay, then that means that that is money that the city gets to collect. Because remember, they're two different things. Yes, there you go. They said because if you were eligible on any delinquent federal money, they said that you were not eligible. Go figure. But that was not a part of the law, Kamari Ellis. That was an additional hurdle that was thought up after the fact. And that's the problem. So people are out here believing and, in goodwill, in good diligence, and in good faith. So that's what we call it in the law, in good faith. In good faith, we're sitting back and we're watching the news and we're reading everything. And I'm sure you were on my live last week and you gathered your documents and you said, I'm all ready. And now I'm here telling you, 2 days after the program started that, okay, so there's this other hurdle that we see. And this is the reason I actually had to go and pull the funding source, which was HUD, to understand whether or not this was a HUD requirement. It was not. This was exclusively a City of Philadelphia requirement for giving out these funds to our most vulnerable population. Because the other thing we knew is that there was an income guideline that you couldn't earn over $2,000 a month to be able to get the rental assistance. So that means that these are people who were in the most dire of situations financially. They were probably more than 30% of their income going to housing, and now they're making it so there's another hurdle. And it's worse when it's a hurdle that you cannot control. So if I'm a business owner and I didn't pay my taxes, it's on me. I mean, it is. It's on me, regardless of whether or not I want to scream to the holy heavens and, shake my fist at the system. Okay, fine. I'm still a business owner, and that's a choice that I made not to pay my taxes, or it's a choice I made not to file my taxes, or it's a choice I made to not do any of the things that I could have done so I was in a better situation, regardless of whether or not I knew the pandemic was coming, because we all knew that none of us knew the pandemic was coming. And specifically, and I'll be honest with you, even those like myself who took it seriously, absolutely from the beginning, who would have thunk that 10 weeks later, we'd still be on lockdown here in the city of Philadelphia? Well, Kamari, and you wonder why Philly is the poorest big city in the country. Well, because we're in our people's pockets right here. I can at least say this one. Okay. So now, what can we do about it? Well, the city has been charged with actually allocating the funds. So the city put these additional requirements on it. So it's almost like an administrative fee, So, okay, if I want, like the small business owner who wants to use, PayPal for business, and then there's like the 2%, 2.5% charge. And then, people like me, because I'm this person. I won't sign up for the stuff when they tell me that I had to pay for their processing. I'm never paying my water bill online. I'm never paying $5 to pay the city of Philadelphia $35. I'm just never doing that. So this is just another example of they are passing on their cost of doing business to us. Now, this is even worse though. As I said, if I'm a small business owner and I didn't do X, Y, and Z, at least it's me that didn't do it. But if I am a renter and I'm in good faith, I've got all my documents together and I think that I'm going to be eligible for this here thing, and then I find out that I'm not, all because my landlord didn't pay taxes, or my landlord, didn't do X, Y, and Z, Q, R, and S. But that's not fair to me. And there's nothing I can do about that. There's also, like I said, the landlord has to agree to forego so that the bureaucracy of Philadelphia can catch up with the payments. They've got to say, hey, you know what? A bird in the bush is better than one in the hand. It's not so. And the reason I had to slow down to make sure I got that right. A bird in the bush is better than one in the hand, because what they're saying is it's better that this money is coming one day from the city of Philadelphia than thinking that the money will come one day from the tenant that you have right now. Strike that the monies will come today from the tenant that you have right now who probably doesn't have any money. So you know what? It's a continuation of punishing the poor. It is. That's exactly what it is, Zahira. Because now what's happening is so everybody thought they was going to be out of money. Well, they're not out of money because they're finding out left and right that the landlords are not eligible and available and able to actually participate in the program. So as a result, or unwilling, that's the other part. Do not forget, some landlords are unwilling to participate in the program. Why? Because they can't go for 6 to 8 months while the bureaucracy of the city of Philadelphia catches up. Because come on, So the moratorium on foreclosures is one thing. But what we know is that the banks are only doing 3 months right now, or that was a part of the initial cares. It was 3 months that the banks were doing that, and everything was not a forbearance. Some of it was just a deferment. So if I am the landlord, me and Miss Peggy, going back to our scenario again. So I'm the landlord, and I have a house that I pay $1,200 a month to, and Miss Peggy gives me $1,400 a month. Because this is the thing, and I want you all to know, generally, the landlords are not making a killing on your property. They're not. The profit margins are actually pretty small on real estate when you're talking about being a landlord. And if you add into this the cost of insurance, homeowners insurance, repairs, the profit margin is actually pretty low. And so you have someone typically who's relying upon those rents to be able to pay another mortgage where they live. So they just can't afford to wait for the city to catch up, especially when, let's say, at the end of the 90 days, they're going to have a balloon payment due for their mortgage. I'm sorry, yeah, for their mortgage on the property you're residing in. And so, like I said, everything was not a forbearance. Some of it was merely a deferment. What's the difference? Deferring is I defer to pay you right now, but I'm going to pay you later. Forbearance is I need you to forbear cost and fees and payment because I don't have it. So depending upon where you were in the life cycle of your loan, if you were closer to paying it off, they were gladly adding it to the end. They were giving you the forbearance. If you're the first 2 years of the mortgage, then they were giving deferments, which is get yourself together. You got 90 days. And then if you used to owe me 1,200, you owe me 1,200 times 3 on that 90th day. Okay. So that meant that most people couldn't afford it. So now you have the landlord in very, very tough situation. What do I do? And I don't know. That's every landlord has to make their Kamari, that's interesting because most people don't know that. Very, very low. It's not rare for a landlord to make $100 in profit a month or less. That is very true, Kamari. But most people who aren't homeowners, who are not landlords, have a tendency to believe that their landlord is making $9 million a year on their one property. They're not, so they're just really not. And so it's a very scary situation. Now, we know that we spent $85 million on something, right? So we passed that. There was the $85 million COVID response. And I immediately just assumed that the monies that were a part of this rental assistance were actually from that money. I thought that, okay? I'm being honest with y'all. I thought that. And I'm sure that I'm not the only one who did. But when I saw this little loophole and caveat, then I went back to find out where the money came from. And that's when I learned that the money actually came from HUD. So this is not a part of the 85 million that's coming out of taxes. This is from the federal government, and all Philadelphia is doing is giving it out. So let me give you another example of something that's like that. The SNAP benefits that I told you about yesterday. Those are federal programs. That's coming from the feds, and it's coming to Pennsylvania to actually disseminate it. And then Pennsylvania pushed down and made it so that Philadelphia can identify its schools. Philadelphia is not charging the state of Pennsylvania administrative fee. The state of Pennsylvania is not charging the feds an administrative fee. But meanwhile, I did not know that Zahira, that's how much they had already spent. 65 million is spent of the 85, but where is it? I did not know this. I actually did not know that. That's how far we were down in it. Especially, like I said, Zahira, I just assumed, and I'm sure I am not the only taxpayer in Philadelphia who assumed that the rental assistance was something that was being paid for out of the coffers of that 85 million. I really did. Look at me, I'm an idiot. Yeah, it is. I mean, but these are the kind of things, and I need to make this clear. Because I come to you every single day, and I come to you every single day because I see all of you as my brothers and sisters. That's how I see it. This is, when I decided that I wanted to be in public office instead of just, doing these things that I do kind of behind the scenes, that meant that it's my duty to inform, educate, and protect. However, it's not my job to make the laws here in the city of Philadelphia. That is for your local lawmakers. All the laws that I am looking to legislate, to make, to mold, they are at the state level. And I'm going to talk to you tomorrow about exactly what kind of laws those are. And so tomorrow we're going to have Civics 101 because it's Feel Good Friday. And I feel really good about helping y'all to understand a little bit of civics, and also who is Danyl Patterson? Why is she running for office? I'm here every single day, but I don't really talk about why. And I don't really talk about who. I just let my light shine for all of you. I'm going to come back here and visit the comments a little bit. Yep, they want us to pay more taxes, and they want us to pay more taxes, and they want us to pay more taxes. Ernie. And I hope that I answered your question, Ernie, Bristow, because I saw you on the other post after, and so that's why I said make sure you come over, because I want everybody to have this information and to understand it. And that's, our biggest thing is that we don't understand it. And actually, I'm a little perturbed that, I assumed, like everybody else, that this was an altruistic endeavor by our city to protect our city, and that our people who make the laws here in Philadelphia and who determine, how the monies are going to be allocated here in Philadelphia, we're making sure that the residents of Philadelphia were getting this assistance. And apparently the determination on how the monies were going to be disseminated were weighed against whether or not the city was owed money. And I'm just going to call it that. Whether or not the city was owed money was a big determination on how the aid is being given out. So now, how do you find out if your landlord owes the money? You don't. You find out when you get denied. That's the biggest problem, okay? You don't find out that there's an issue until you get denied. So here you are, Peggy Armstead, my tenant over there, and she's not my real tenant, y'all. I'm just using her because she was on here first. See, that's what happened when you hear first, Miss Peggy. So Miss Peggy is my tenant, and she's been paying me rent in good faith, and she thinks she's, tumbling along and everything's good and fine and dandy, and she's come across a hard spot and she thinks she's going to be helped. And meanwhile, I haven't paid taxes on the property in 3 years, and now I done had one of them liens against me from the law firm with the 19 names. It's really a collection agency downtown. And it's only paralegals that work there. You can never get an attorney. I know this because clients come to me because they have these liens on their records. And what happens is now you got to get one of them paralegals on the line and try to get this straightened out, talking about the landlord. So now that means that remotely, and you only got 17 days to do it. 7 days to do it. Don't forget, you only got 7 days. And at the end of 7 days, what happens? You, Peggy Armstead, your application has been kicked out of the system, and you're not holding your space in line anymore. I'm going to just keep saying all of it is regarding COVID-19. Unfortunately, Zahira, that seems to be the easiest way to get a response to anything. Yes. Why does your toe hurt? COVID-19. Do something about it. Yeah, it seems like it, I don't know. I need my eyelashes done. Why? Because of COVID-19. Maybe it'll, consider it to be essential then. But, and just an aside for that. So now we've got this rental assistance issue, and this takes us to issue number 2. So now, let's say Miss Peggy decides, look, I really can't afford this $1,200 a month, and I'm at the end of my lease with Miss Patterson, and so I'm going to go and get me someplace else to live because I can't afford this, and I need to start thinking about downsizing and finding me something else I can afford. Well, you know what else? The folks at the state level determined that real estate was not essential. It was not essential. And there were several Democrats here in the city of Philadelphia who voted against the measure to make them designated as essential, that home sales were not essential, but also that rentals were not essential because they didn't want them showing the properties and those things in the transactions. So anything that was not already in the process as of March, I think it was the 15th, as of March 15th, could not go through. So if it was not already in escrow, it was not already a deal that was being done, then it could not go through until everybody was made to be an essential worker. Well, what have we seen since then? Okay, So we're thinking, okay, there's a homeowner issue, right? Right. So, and I'm gonna tell you, and this is what I have really learned in all my years, is that people a lot of times only they only have empathy for situations that really impact them personally. So a lot of times, if you're dealing with people who don't own property, they don't have a lot of sympathy for people, the troubles of people who do own properties. So if I am, I have a property and I'm trying to get rid of it for whatever reason, people who don't own property really don't understand how traumatic it is. But let me tell you, a lot of times what happens here is that somebody's in the middle of selling and they need to be able to sell, get rid of that one property so they can get another one. So what happened? They had actual agreements of sale on the one property, and it was in escrow before the March 15 deadline. And then what happened? Now they can't actually buy another property in Pennsylvania. One more time, I can be in escrow to sell my property, but I can't turn around and buy another property because in Pennsylvania, real estate transactions are not considered essential. That's one problem. But let me take it back to the renters, because we know that domestic abuse is up almost 40% nationwide because of this pandemic. One more time, 40%. And so if you're in a situation, a violent situation, and you need to move from where you are for your safety, guess what? You cannot make a transaction to rent. You can't go look somewhere else and want to move. You can't get out of your situation and go to a better situation unless you can go to your cousin's house. You can go to your friend's house, but you can't go and you can't see a property to move to because real estate transactions are not deemed essential under the current order. So that means that we are forcing people to live in these situations. And now I'm going to give you even one more. So you know that we had folks who were released early, who were, nonviolent offenders, who were at the end of their sentence. And one of the things that happened was they put them out on the streets, literally put them out on the streets. And why? Because they didn't have anywhere for them to go. So we already knew that the halfway houses were full when they sent them home. And now, remember, real estate transactions are not essential. So there was no place to send them. And I want to give a shout out to the frontline dads. Wanda Walker, you did a great job making sure that some of those folks were housed immediately. That's fabulous. But even the housing assistance agencies whose job it is to assist in these crises, could not function amongst them because technically they're still rental agencies. So they were non-essential and not transactions of business that could do that. Yeah, you're right. Yes. Yeah, the rooming housing business, y'all got that when my husband got out and got out of the rooming housing business about 2 years ago. You're right, it's hectic. It is very the rooming houses are even harder. Um, yes, former coalition. That's fabulous idea, Ernie. Yes. A lot of times, and that's so Ernie, it's one of the reasons that, we have had our faith Fridays, we've had our, Woosah Wednesdays, because sometimes the faith is not just in the higher power, it's the faith in all humanity. That there are people who really do want to do the right thing. And every single day, I will see this because I see people like Charlotte Greer Brown. She said she talked to me later. I see folks like Charlotte Greer Brown making sure that she's bringing the info to the people. She's still working her state of emergency. They're going back to their weekly workshop, and that's fabulous. I tell you all, you should follow her page and get in on those workshops. They're great information. Yes, the Wanda, that's exactly what I'm saying. Some of us were in the middle of trying to move. That's exactly right. Some people were in the middle of trying to move and could not. As a matter of fact, I have a property that I own right now that was actually vacant. And I was in the middle of renovating it, so that I can prepare for tenants. Well, you can't renovate it because, we're in COVID. Okay. We're in the pandemic, and I understand that. That's fine. Do you know how many people know that I have that property who are willing to move into it without the renovation just because they need somewhere to go and they know the property's there and it's vacant? And I'm just like, well, no, because I wanted to upgrade the property, and I appreciate you wanting to do this because you're in a bad situation, but I really wanted to upgrade the property. And people are desperate, and we cannot feed on the desperation of other people. And I mean, when I say people were asking me, could that, well, if it could just be for a couple months because I just need, while we work this here thing out. Well, the thing is, I can't even tell you a couple months because we don't know when we're going back to, our new normal, and that's what I'm going to call it, because we know it's not going to be life as we know it, right? It's going to be a whole different kind of life, but it's very, very difficult. So that is what I had for you all. As I told you, these are not the laws that I am attempting to make. So that means you need to contact the folks who make those particular laws when I'm talking about the rental assistance. So those would be your city council people and your mayor. That's who's responsible for that. Make sure that you have your voices heard. I'm here every day and I hear your voices. Make sure that you're having your voices heard. For those of you in the housing issue, who are talking about whether or not they can move at all and whether or not it's essential, there is actually an organization that has actually banded together because that is actually their goal, to make sure that the House bill to reopen, to make or to deem real estate transactions as essential, and they are moving. And actually, let me give that to you specifically so you have it. I'm sorry. I intended to have it ready for you, and of course I didn't, because y'all know that's how life works. And then I forgot what it was called. And of course I don't have it right here because that's also how life works. Okay. Who did I send it to? Because somebody asked me. It is the Alliance for a Better Pennsylvania. So the Alliance for a Better Pennsylvania has banded together, and their issue is supporting the House bill to make real estate transactions essential. So for that, and again, I said a House bill, so that means you need to reach out to your state representatives, and let them know that you were displeased with their vote, because the Philadelphia delegation voted against it. So that means that your representatives here in the city of Philadelphia did not see housing transactions as essential. And so you need to reach out to them to see whether or not you can have your needs met. And that is me trying to help us all do better together. So I hope to see you tomorrow for Feel Good Friday, because we're really going to talk about the candidate. Yes, we're going to talk about me, why I'm running, what I stand for, my platform, and Civics 101. So I invite anybody who is watching, please log on, have some questions for me, because I like it better when it's a dialogue. And yay, world premiere. My commercial is going to air in the morning on Facebook, YouTube, across all social media. I have to remind you that I am asking you to vote Danyl Patterson for state rep if you live in the 190th on June 2nd. If you've already requested or you already have your ballot, I'm going to tell you that you can find me on the row with Joe. So that's the second row. Joe Biden for president will be at the top. Come straight down to your state rep, and I will be the first name you see, Danyl Patterson, for state rep of the 190th. If you have any questions or concerns, reach out to us at www.pattersonfor190th190th.com. That's www.pattersonfor190th.com. You can also go there if you need to register to vote still, if you need your ballot to request it, or if you have any questions for me, or if you just want to find and see my fabulous videos and interact with me directly. We are all in this together, and we will do better together. Again, this is Danyl Patterson, West Philly, baby.